Good afternoon, everybody. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this workshop on clinical data publication. We have around 800 participants joining us today for the event, and I think it really shows the very high level of interest in transparency-related activities, as we had seen with the launch of our flagship Policy 70 on clinical data publication back in 2016 and during the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, reinforcing our communication and transparency efforts is a priority for EMA, and that's outlined in the agency's work programme document to 2025. We really recognise that transparency is key to reinforcing trust in regulatory decisions on medicines, and from the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we implemented a package of exceptional transparency measures, including publication of clinical data for COVID vaccines and therapeutics, as well as full risk management plans to complement existing measures such as the European Public Assessment Reports. Now, since the suspension of clinical data publication in 2018, EMA and our stakeholders have been eagerly anticipating its full relaunch, and I'm very pleased that we have the opportunity today to present the plans and practical next steps to make that happen and really get clinical data publication well and truly back on the road once again. I'd like to thank you all for participating today, and I will pass the floor to Anne-Sophie Orny-Oud, who's Head of Documents Access and Publication, to introduce the CDP team and today's agenda. Over to you, Anne-Sophie.
Many thanks, Melanie. Thanks a lot for joining today. Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are joining from. I'm going to just in a few minutes go through more organization and housekeeping for this webinar. So the agenda today will cover 4 presentations. 4 members of the clinical data publication team will present scope and updates from Karen. The timelines will be presented by David. Sylvia will present the guidance and the new Q&A document, and Radu will close the presentation with the anonymization report template. You can find as well the reference to a Slido. Please do not use the WebEx chat, use the Slido. We will receive the question throughout the duration of the webinar. We will go without any interruptions through the 4 presentation, and we'll take question at the very end. We have quite many attendees and only 25 minutes for the question. So we're going to look at Slido and take the question that are the most popular, the most liked, or the more often, and as well haven't been covered by any of the presentation. If we have time, we will then open the floor to direct question, and we invite you to switch on your camera should you wish to ask a question. Of course, we anticipate that many questions will be in Slido and it won't be possible to go through all of them. However, we will take great inspiration into preparing our Q&A, and we'll look at all the questions in order to address as many as we can throughout our guidance and our Q&A. So without further ado, I would like also to inform you that we're going to have a webinar recorded. The recording will be together with all the slides available on the EMA website in a few weeks, so you can refer to them later on if you need to do so. I would like to give the floor now to our first speaker, Karen Quigley. Karen, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anne-Sophie. Good afternoon, everyone. For my presentation today, I'm talking about what's new. And of course, the Policy 70 has been around for nearly 10 years at this stage, so it's not all new. But what we do want to present to you this afternoon is the updates. So this is based on the experience that we had with the first round of Policy 70, and also with the experience that we've had with the COVID-19 products over the last number of years, and the collaboration that we've had there with a number of different stakeholders. And so on the basis of that, we have decided that it would be in the interest of both the stakeholders in preparing packages and also for the EMA in reviewing and publishing the packages that we would introduce some changes. So on my first slide, Yes. So initially, some background for those of you that may not be so familiar with the policy. Policy 70 was adopted by our management board in 2014, and it became into effect for new active substances from January 2015 for new marketing authorizations, and from 1st of July for the extension of indication applications for the centrally authorized products. So of course, this covers the clinical data within those packages. So the first actual clinical data package was published in October 2016. And then, of course, as many of you will be familiar with, the policy was suspended in December 2018 as part of the business continuity plans due to the relocation of the agency from London to the Netherlands. All the time that we were offline, there was, of course, the intention that when the policy would be reactivated, and it has taken a little bit longer than foreseen at the time of the initial suspension, primarily due to COVID. And so we're very pleased that the management board agreed in December of last year to gradually reinitiate the policy. So we're having the first steps in that relaunch this year. Throughout the time period when the actual Policy 70 was suspended, we of course had the exceptional transparency measures applying to the COVID-19 pandemic, and they were much more extensive in many ways than what the original publications for the Policy 70, in terms of more applications in terms of the post-authorization were published, and more safety data in relation to the COVID-19 products. So, to reiterate, the Policy 70, the aims are unchanged. The actual policy, the main tenets of the policy remain the same, but we're just implementing some procedural updates, which we hope that you will agree will be beneficial overall. So on this next slide, we have a snapshot here of the clinical data portal where the applications are published. So this again is what we have used for the original Policy 70 and where the COVID-19 products have been published. So you see here that you need to log in and create an account if you're a first-time user and you want to access the clinical data on our website. On the left-hand side of this slide, you see the publications, a snapshot of the publications from COVID-19 during last year, 2022, where there were 46 procedures published, over 206,000 pages, and we have some web traffic figures there for the viewings and downloads, but needless to say, throughout the COVID pandemic, there was a huge increase in interest in viewing the clinical data related to COVID-19 products as it was published on our website. So in terms of the scope of the relaunch will apply to new active substances from September this year, 2023, which are adopted by the CHMP. And so the new active substances are as defined by the Regulation 726/2004. So it will be determined by eligibility to the centralised procedure. So if your product is eligible for the centralised procedure on the basis of a new active substance, you will fall in scope for the relaunch. It also includes products which will receive a negative CHMP opinion, and it would also include products that are withdrawn prior to the CHMP opinion being given. We will, of course, continue with the COVID-19 and any other public health emergency clinical data publications, for example, the monkeypox virus, and these are now subject to a separate transparency regulation 123 2002 for those of you who like the detail of the regulation, and within that there's an Article 17 in that regulation which talks about the requirement to publish the clinical data within 2 months of the opinion being given for these public health emergency products that fall within the regulation. So we will continue to publish those on an ongoing basis. In terms of the relaunch, we will be sending detail-specific invitation letters in order to request packages. So if your product is in scope, you will be hearing from us. We will be offering pre-submission meetings, as we did before in the first round of Policy 70. And there we offer them specifically to small and medium-sized enterprises and also to marketing authorization holders submitting their first package. And we intend to do the same this time. And again, they will be on offer routinely to all applicants submitting packages. And we believe that these are very beneficial and should be availed of. There's also some changes, as we will present as we go through the webinar, that we hope to improve both the processes and the efficiency. And we're going to continue to collaborate with Health Canada. And this is something that has worked very well during the pandemic. And those of you who have been interested in the COVID-19 products will know that we've worked very closely with them on joint collaboration for products which have had a similar timeline and publish the packages at the similar timeframes. And so we hope to continue that collaboration, and also some of the benefits that we've had from that we will be working through in the relaunch of the policy. So on this slide we talk about what is new. So the emphasis will be really on the early preparation of packages, and one of my colleagues will talk in more detail about the timelines, but really that you do need to prepare your package as soon as that you receive the invitation letter from us, that you're in scope for Policy 70. That we're all aware that there is a lot of preparatory work to be done in order to prepare these packages, and that the earlier you start, the more likely it is that you will reach a time frame that would be an early publication of the clinical data. So as I said, we will have targeted pre-submission meetings, which will be specific to the product. And there we will talk about the scope of what's in scope for the publication from within your clinical data package, what may be out of scope, the anonymization approach that you would take. We would ask you to present that to us, how you propose to anonymize your product. If you're intending to include, for example, any commercially confidential information, you feel that there's any in your product, then that is the opportunity to discuss that with us. And of course, there will be more guidance, and you will hear a little bit more about that as well later on in the webinar, that will be published. And that is in addition to the guidance that's already on our website. So we will also be having an updated cover letter that will be submitted with the packages, and this will include the checklist which we have been trialling throughout the COVID-19 pandemic with some of the marketing authorization holders. And this is to ensure that the packages are valid on the first submission. So what we want to avoid is that we have repeated rounds of packages being submitted and being invalid and then having to be resubmitted. So we believe that this builds in additional quality control into the submission of the packages. And so this is something that we're going to bring those items forward that were in the checklist into the new cover letter, and hopefully that will work well for both sides. During the COVID-19 as well, the EMA has been developed some software which has been very useful for both us and for the marketing authorization holders in terms of developing the list of documents that are in scope. So we send that to the marketing authorization holder with the invitation letter. So then that starts the dialogue of the documents that are in scope. And so we can agree basically what needs to be included within your package at an early stage. And so we can discuss if there's duplicate documents or documents that you are unsure if they're in scope or out of scope. We can have all of those discussions at that stage. As a final point here, a question that we often receive is in working with the clinical trial regulation and the CTIS, where the clinical trial reports, the CSRs, are also being uploaded into the CTIS, and it is of course mandatory since January this year. So there is guidance that's published from CTIS on what is personal data and what is CCI, and the Policy 70 team are working very closely with the CTIS colleagues in order to ensure that there is collaboration and that there is consistency between the approach on both sides. In terms of a webinar, we are always asked about CCI. So we've included here a slide on commercially confidential information. And this reverts back to our experience last year with the COVID. So in 2022, as we saw in an earlier slide, we had 46 procedures published. And of those, 7 had proposed CCI, and only 3 of them had CCI accepted. So overall, the percentage of CCI within the documents is very small, 0.01%. And that's what we expect to see. And that's in line with what we had seen previously in Policy 70, where you can see the figures and the report on this in the annual report that's published on our website there as well. So in terms of the rejections, the most common rejection for CCI is that the information is already in the public domain. And for the COVID products, when we say in the public domain, it's been included in the public assessment report published on our website. So it's also been included in the summary of product characteristics. We've had people claiming CCI for issues that are all, in the SMPC. And then also another thing to think about is to avoid redacting entire paragraphs or pages, because this also gives rise to rejection of CCI claims, that they need to be very detailed and specific in terms of the proposals that you're making. And we will also be amending the justification table slightly to make it very clear that you have actually checked that it's not in the public domain. In terms of, we're always asked the question, what is accepted as CCI? So here we've put some of the details where we accepted CCI in, as I say, last year in the COVID applications. And so in module 2.5, 271 and at protocol, we accepted as CCI some detailed manufacturing details, some assay information, and some details on some candidate products which were not further developed. So they are the kind of areas in which CCI was accepted. So in conclusion, we would say for CCI, you need to have a detailed justification. It needs to be very precise, and it also needs to indicate how it would undermine your economic interest. But the main message being that we do not really expect to see very much commercially confidential information within the clinical data packages, that primarily we would expect to see that more on the quality side. And then on my final slide, I have some key messages. So we will be sending out, as I say, detailed invitation letters at the end of this month to those that have products in scope for the September CHMP meeting. We will be including in those the list of documents that are in scope. It will be in the marketing authorization holder's interest to review that list of documents and to start preparing their packages early to either decide the anonymization approach that will be applied, whether it's in-house or you need to approach a vendor, and to avail of the pre-submission meetings, which will be very much product specific. And we will have detailed conversations as to what is in scope, what is out of scope, and also in terms of the list of expected documents that we send you. So this is the overall list of documents. But within those, there can be out-of-scope sections. And for example, one of the issues that we want to avoid is you anonymize thousands of pages within one of those documents, which is subsequently just concluded that it's actually out of scope. So to avoid that work, these kind of meetings would be very useful. And it's also useful for you to review the information within each of the documents carefully in advance of those meetings, so that this is a scenario that does not occur, because this is something that we have seen, for example, more recently in COVID-19 products, and not a good use of either your time as a stakeholder or our time in reviewing something which is not necessary. So we would ask you to identify the out-of-scope sections and mark them up appropriately. Also, it's important to complete the QC, the quality control checks prior to submission, that the documents are present. We have scenarios where we have duplicate documents submitted, where documents are missing. Again, these are very common mistakes that we have seen previously, and it involves the invalidation of the package, which means the resubmission of the entire package, not just the one or two documents that are missing. And so that creates more work for all parties. And then we would also say that, please do contact us for any specific product issues, that there can also be issues that arise that are specific to your product, to the way that it was set up. And so that we're very, very happy to discuss those and resolve any of these issues up front, rather than have, additional work for you as the stakeholders providing the clinical data for publication, or us in terms of the review process. So I would leave it there. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Karen. We're going now to move to the second presentation from David. Please, David.
Thank you, Anne-Sophie, and good afternoon to all the attendees to this webinar. My name is David Fernandez, and I will present briefly the revised procedural timelines that will apply during the first step of the relaunch of activities related to Policy 70, clinical data publication, and these will be the timelines that applicants will have to consider for the preparation and the submission of their document packages for publication. I will start by providing a very minor change that has been made on the clinical data publication deadlines, and then I will move on to provide the revised periods for applicants to submit their reduction proposal document packages, and I can anticipate now that these periods have been extended for all the types of applications that will fall under the scope of Policy 70 during the restart. Then, as my colleague Karen has already mentioned in her presentation, applicants can now expect to receive an invitation email well in advance of the CHMP outcomes and opinions, and also well in advance of the start of the period for the submission of the reduction proposals. And I will comment on the details when applicants can expect to receive these invitation emails, also for the different types of applications. Then there will be a series of slides integrating all this information in a more visual way, and by providing the overview of the timelines for the different types of applications in scope. And then finally, the last couple of slides will be dedicated to a very high-level overview of the clinical data publication review process on our side. I can also anticipate here that nothing will change for now in the review process. It stays the same as it is described in the external guidance on the implementation of Policy 70, but even though nothing will change, we thought this would be a nice opportunity to provide a high-level overview. Here on the slide regarding the publication deadlines, you can see presented side by side what is written in the current version of the policy, Policy 70, and what will apply during the first step of the restart of a clinical data publication, with the only change highlighted in red. As you can see, the change applies to initial marketing authorization, extension of indication, and line extension applications. Before, the deadline for publication was relative to the issuance of the Commission decision at 60 days after the issuance, and now it will be relative to the CHMP opinion, so the deadline will now be 120 days after the opinion. For withdrawn applications and the applications that are being evaluated under Article 58 of the regulation from 2004 that are also in the scope of the policy, the deadline will stay the same at 150 days after the receipt of the withdrawal letter by EMA for the applications that are withdrawn, and 150 days after the CHMP opinion for Article 58 applications. About the periods for the submission of the reduction proposals, here again, you can see presented side by side what is written in the current version of, in this case, the external guidance on the implementation of Policy 70, and the timelines that will apply during the first step of the restart. Again, highlighting the changes in red. For initial marketing authorization applications, applicants will have now until 30 days post the opinion to submit the reduction proposals. So the period has been extended 20 days compared to what is written in the policy. For extension of indication applications, the same, applicants will have until 30 days post opinion. And for withdrawn applications and Article 58 applications, the period has been extended 30 days. So applicants will have now until 60 days post the receipt of the withdrawal letter by EMA, or 60 days post opinion for Article 58 applications. About the invitation email, those applicants that have ongoing initial marketing authorization procedures for medicines containing new active substances, as my colleague Karen has explained, and or line extension applications for COVID-19 medicines, with a planned CHMP opinion date in September 2023 and onwards, they will receive an invitation email by procedure day 121, whenever this is possible, because we are aware that some of these procedures are already or maybe already at a later stage in the scientific evaluation, and in these cases, the applicants can expect to receive the invitation email at the beginning of the next month, in June. And whenever we have the chance to catch up, we will target the invitation emails around procedure day 121. For those applicants that have ongoing extension of indication applications for COVID-19 medicines that will be in scope for during the first step of the relaunch, they can expect to receive the invitation email as close as possible, as to 90 days before the CHMP outcome. And again, we will try to send invitation emails as close to this date as possible. Several documents will be attached to this email that we hope will be useful resources for applicants to prepare and submit their packages. There will be an updated question and answers document that my colleague Silvia Garrido will introduce in the presentation after mine. The draft list of documents that my colleague Karen has already explained, and we will request agreement within 2 weeks after the receipt of the invitation email by applicants. Of course, by the time when we send the invitation email, this list may not be final, as additional documents may be requested during the procedure and may be submitted at later stages. But based on our experience, by day 121 of the procedure, most of the documents that will end up being published can be already identified from the common technical document. And the submission checklist, that is not exactly the same checklist that you can find in the annexes of the external guidance on the implementation of Policy 70. It has been slightly amended, and it will now be mandatory for applicants to fill in and include in the submission, with the intention, as Karen explained, to reduce the number of submissions that are invalidated. Here is the same information that I have just presented, but just shown as overviews of the timelines for the different types of applications. Here you can see for initial marketing authorization applications and line extension applications, for extension of indication applications withdrawn, and Article 58. I am not going to cover the contents because it is the same that I have already presented. And finally, to conclude the presentation, a high-level overview of the review process. Here on the slide, you can see the steps that apply to the assessment of the reduction proposals. I will not cover all the steps, and for this I will refer you, in case you need further information, to the external guidance, as for now nothing will change in terms of the timelines for the review process. But yes, a few reminders to applicants. We will require a technically valid submission of the reduction proposal in order to start counting the days in the process. Once we receive the valid package, the clinical data publication coordinators will have up to 10 days to perform the validation of the contents, and this second validation is different from the technical validation that is more related to the submission. Here, the validation will be done by using the submission checklist. So this is why it is important that applicants pay special attention when filling in and completing this checklist before the submission. The package may be declared invalid, and in that case, we will send a communication to the applicants with the reasons for the invalidation and requesting a replacement package. And in the case the package is valid, we will proceed with the following steps in the process. Not all the steps may apply in all cases, and those that may not always apply are grayed out on the slide, steps 5, 6, and 7. So, for example, if there are no CCI proposals made by the applicants, step 5 will not apply because it is related to the agreement on the CCI proposals. And once the assessment of the reduction proposals is concluded and the conclusion letter is sent to the applicants, we will then request that applicants finalize the reductions in the documents and that they submit a final redacted document package. This package, we will perform a final package check and still just to make sure that the reductions applied in the documents are in agreement with the conclusion of the assessment. If the package is declared invalid, which may also happen at this stage, we hope it won't happen too often, we will request a replacement package, and in the case the package is valid, we will inform the applicants about the date for the publication, which should take place within 10 days after the receipt of a final valid package. And then the documents will be published in the Clinical Data Publication Portal, and they will be available for the public. And with this, I conclude my slides, and I would like to thank you all for your attention, and I will give the floor to my colleague, Radu Popescu.
Thanks a lot, David.
Sylvia,
I think before
yes.
we move to Radu, we have a presentation online. So Sylvia, if you can present your slide. Thank you very much.
Okay, I will cover the main guidance documents available on clinical data publication process. In my presentation, I will also focus on the updated version of the Q&A document, which will be soon ready and published in our website. And to wrap up, I will cover other ways we have to help you further to prepare and submit CDP procedures. So there are three main CDP guidance documents. The EMA's clinical data publication, also known as Policy 0070, and which is a transparency landmark initiative and resulted in the agency proactively publishing clinical data by pharmaceutical companies to support their regulatory applications, the external guidance on the publication of clinical data, which was drafted in 2018, and the Q&A on the publication of clinical data for medicinal products for human use, which was also drafted in 2018, but a new version is about to see the light. Before publication of the documents in scope, we understand that companies have to ensure that the personal data as well as commercial confidential information is protected. The European Medicines Agency, the European Medicines Agency developed a detailed guidance for applicants to facilitate compliance with the Policy 0070. This external guidance has like 4 chapters or sections. The first one covers the scope of the guidance in relation to the phase 1 of the Policy 0070. It covers definitions as well as the details about implementation. The procedural aspects related to the submission of the clinical report is included in the document and covers the clinical report document types, the process for the submission of the clinical reports, as well as the publication. How to anonymize clinical reports is mentioned in the chapter 3 of the external guidance, and it provides also information on some of the anonymization techniques that are available to ensure that the clinical reports submitted for publication are properly anonymized before publication. And the identification and reduction of the commercial confidential information is included in the last part of the guidance. It covers also the level and nature of the reductions that are typically accepted, but it also covers a comprehensive overview on how the reduction of CCI is handled in the context of Policy 0070. So if I now focus on the Q&A document, as I mentioned, is currently being drafted to provide a practical guidance to applicants. And I must stress that this document must be read in conjunction with the Policy 0070 as well as external guidance. So it complements each other. It's a compilation of questions and answers on practical aspects that have been raised during meetings with pharma companies, with MAHs, with the stakeholders, and basically it's written in plain English, so it's very hands-on. It's the content of the Q&A mirrors the content that you can find in the Policy 0070 as well as external guidance, in a sense that covers the same aspects, but in a more practical way. For example, covers the procedural anonymization report and CCI-related questions. All of these, you're going to find it in a similar way in the Q&A, but in a more practical approach. This document will be updated regularly to reflect any changes as we go along, and the questions that are amended will be marked with new or revised, together with the date that it has been revised or added to the Q&A document. What is new in this version of the Q&A document? Well, there are some changes. For instance, and at present, as my colleagues have covered, only initial marketing authorization for medicines containing new active substances will be processed. This is one of the changes. In addition, for example, in this CDP relaunch phase, We have also made a difference in the scope between COVID and non-COVID products. So as you have heard, for COVID products, initial marketing authorization application, extension of indications and line extensions will be processed. And for non-COVID products, we will only process initial marketing authorization applications. We also have taken out anything that is related to the phase 2 of policy 0070, which, as you know, concerns to the publication of individual patient data. At the moment, we are focused on the relaunch of the phase 1, so only questions related to the phase 1 of the policy 0070 are included in this document. And EMA will implement the phase 2 at a later stage. In addition, the EMA sought to strengthen the existing collaboration with Health Canada on CDP, as you probably heard. And in this way, one of the initiatives is using the same anonymization report template document, which will be of compulsory use by MAHs. And the next speaker, Radu Popescu, will cover extensively the anonymization report template. And another change is the timelines, as you have heard from David. The timelines of submission for CDP packages have been extended, and this is will be covered in the new version of the Q&A. So all these changes will be explained extensively. Now I'd like to show you briefly 3 examples of how the Q&A document displayed information. So for instance, the question that you see in the slides, I don't intend you to read it, is just to show you how it looks like. It covers, the question is related to the submission of the clinical data package. And it covers how packages, redacted and the final ones, need to be submitted via e-submission gateway. So once this is done, the app explains that the applicant will receive automatic replies, but also provide details in case of fail due to technical compliance check, for example. So it covers also what do you have to do in this case. So the information provided is very practical. It has also the links to the relevant guidance documents and templates. In this particular case, in this example, as you see in the blue color, it provides here the ECTD guidance document submission. So if you click, it's a link to the relevant guidance. So next one is my next example is related to the how to complete the justification table for proposed CCI reductions. For the sake of clarity, I will mention that this is only half of the answer, because the answer was very long, so I just cut it. But just to take you through, the answer will provides details on how the justification table document must be completed, listing all the proposed CCI information that you want to consider for reduction, but provides also advice as to, for example, the information proposed must not be in the public domain. This is, as Karen has mentioned, the golden rule for us, that there is a need for you to complete one justification table per document submitted. The justification that you provided in the table has to be detailed as to why you propose the element to be a CCI. So it has, it provides advice and explains also what do you have to do if you don't have any CCI elements to propose, and therefore you do not have to submit any justification table. Then in that case, you need to mention that in the cover letter, so we know that there is no CCI from your side. In summary, it describes what is important to consider when completing the justification table form, how to do it in a practical way, as well as the links to the template and guidance that you will need to consult when working on the CCI elements. I think the final example is related to the fact that in some cases, MAH is mentioned in the anonymization report other instances where companies' data sharing is the case. This is something that comes, we've seen that comes often in the anonymization reports submitted by MAHs, and we have advised to avoid cross-reference to other portals where similar information is publicly available. And the reason for that is in order to avoid confusion to the reader. So these are, examples of questions and answers, and we will add more as we go along the way, and we hope that you will find them helpful. Next slide. I could also like to mention the following EMEA pages where you can find useful information when preparing CDP packages. The first one is related to the clinical data publication that is under the EMEA website. And in this page, you can find all the guidance documents that I just mentioned, plus all the templates. So everything that you really need when preparing your package you can find it there under the support for industry tag. But also the second webpage that I wanted to mention is the clinical data portal. The clinical data portal contains clinical data published under the European Medicines Agency policy on the publication of clinical data. So clinical data published are a very good source of information to learn how the documents submitted are published, which elements are redacted or transformed as they are considered PPD or CCI information. In addition, you can check how the anonymization strategy is followed and is described in the anonymization report for other CDP packages submitted. So this is a really good source of information that you can check. Yeah, I like just to finalize my presentation by telling you that we at the agency understand that the transparency initiatives such as Policy 0070 impose additional obligations on applicants. And if there is a takeaway message from me, that would be that we are here to help you. So the CDP team can help you by responding to any specific questions that you may have before or during the preparation of the CDP package procedure to ensure a smooth submission. But also, if you prefer a more dedicated session with us, a pre-submission meeting can be requested to the CDP team at any point in time. So these are I'm going to finalize explaining you. If you have any questions prior, you have received an email from us, you need to use the EMEA web form adding CDP in the subject field, and you have the link to the web form in the slide that I'm just showing you. However, if your company has already been contacted by us via invitation email, then the CDP team has already been appointed to work on your procedure. So you need to contact the CDP coordinator mentioned in the correspondence, and we will, reply to your question. So I think this is all from me, and I just wanted to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. We're now going to move to the next presentation and the last one of this webinar. Please, Radu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anne-Sophie. My name is Radu Popescu, and I have the pleasure to share with you the exciting news of a new anonymization report template. So the EMA and Health Canada clinical data publication teams have been listening to the calls for further alignment for our publication requirements, and we do intend to mandate a new joint EMA Health Canada anonymization report template to be used for all document packages published on our clinical data publication portals. Today, I will walk you through the anonymization report evolution at the EMA, share details about the content and structure of the new anonymization report template, and look at the benefits of using a structure fields template. Before diving into the content and structure of the new template, I would like to remind the audience why we need the anonymization report and why we think that a joint Health Canada EMA anonymization report is the next natural step in harmonization of clinical data publication requirements. Some of you may already know that each and every document package published on the EMA clinical data portal must be accompanied by an anonymization report. The report gives the applicant, the party who performs the anonymization, the opportunity to document the anonymization process, demonstrating to the EMA and the public that the document package was adequately anonymized. In addition, it allows the users of the published clinical data documents to understand which of the disclosed data variables were modified. Therefore, the first version of Policy 70 guidance, published back in 2016, did contain an anonymization report template, more of a backbone of a template. The template can be found in Annex 1.2 of the current guidance. 1 year later, following the experience accumulated with the first published document packages, we reached the conclusion that a simplified version of the anonymization report would be required for those packages which don't contain patient identifiers. The simplified template can be found in Annex 1.13 of the same guidance. Later on, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we further refined the anonymization report template, and in close collaboration with our peers from Health Canada, we agreed on a joint Health Canada EMA anonymization report template. The move was received positively by the applicants, and it gave us the chance to grasp the benefits of working jointly with Health Canada colleagues. The joint EMA Health Canada anonymization report template gave applicants the opportunity to prepare one single anonymization report for document packages meant to be submitted to both agencies. Moreover, the agencies had the opportunity to streamline the feedback on the anonymization report and convey it to the applicants in a consolidated manner. Building up on the positive experience witnessed with the COVID-19 publications, we believe that making available a single anonymization report template applicable to all EMA and Health Canada submissions would bring efficiency gains for the applicants as well as for the agencies. With the new template, we'd also like to improve the experience of the users of the anonymized clinical documents and provide them with a concise report where the information of interest would be easily noticed. We feel that this can be achieved by producing an anonymization report template containing a combination of questions with predefined answer options and free text fields. In this manner, the applicant would be prompted to touch upon the most relevant anonymization strategy considerations and at the same time allowed to expand on specific aspects relevant to each individual document package. The first version of the anonymization report structure fields template is currently under development and will be shared with the applicants as soon as it is finalized. In the following 3 slides, I would like to give you some insight into its content and structure. The most important message is that the backbone structure of the report is not changed, with only one exception. It contains an additional section on which I will touch upon later on in my presentation. In the first part of the anonymization report, the applicant is expected to describe the anonymization strategy, the anonymization approach followed, whether, for example, running a qualitative or quantitative risk assessment can be indicated by simply ticking the corresponding box. The personal data variables contained in each document package can be listed in a tabular manner. The table will include a column for the data subject category each variable belongs to, for example, either study participants or study personnel, and a column for the anonymization technique employed for each variable. All fields will contain predefined values shown as drop-down lists, which should ensure nomenclature consistency. For this specific section of the report, we felt that the above-mentioned elements would be enough to provide a clear description of the anonymization strategy. Therefore, we didn't find necessary to include a free text field. Going to the risk assessment section. In the risk assessment section, we'd like to ensure that all applicants do describe the reference population and especially the main characteristics relevant from a risk of re-identification perspective. Therefore, this section would contain several targeted questions intended to guide the applicant when describing the characteristics of the reference population. The characteristics cover would be how the reference population was defined, the size of the reference population, whether rare disease populations or any special population categories were included in the studies part of the development plan. For example, you may consider that the denominator for your risk assessment calculation is the total number of clinical trial participants included in the entire development plan, and you would be required to provide the exact figure in the report. We noticed that quite a number of anonymization reports sent to us for review don't mention or relevant risks of re-identification categories specific to each of the document packages. Therefore, we request the applicants to mention in the report the following 3 types of risks. The initial risk of re-identification associated with the dataset, in other words, to indicate how probable a successful re-identification attack would be. The selected risk threshold for anonymization. In practice, the applicant will anonymize the dataset so that the risk would be lowered under that selected threshold. And the residual risk of re-identification, which would indicate the actual level of risk of re-identification achieved after the full anonymization of the dataset. For the risk assessment section, we acknowledge that additional considerations, including document package specific ones, may need to be taken into account in order to achieve an acceptable level of anonymization. Therefore, we would give the applicants the opportunity to expand on these considerations in a free text field. One of the anonymization report sections, which typically is underdeveloped in the draft anonymization reports reviewed by us, is the data utility one. Therefore, we felt that the applicants would need further guidance on how to describe the data utility considerations. The section will require the applicant to mention up to 5 personal data variables present in the document package, which would bear the highest data utility from a scientific perspective. In addition, it would be required to explain to which extent the data utility of these variables was affected by the transformations or reductions. Furthermore, the applicant would be required to indicate how the aggregated data and the narratives were dealt with. The expectation would be that the aggregated data is disclosed in full and the narratives are disclosed in an anonymized manner as opposed to being redacted in full. Any deviations from these expectations will need to be documented in the deviation section. And this brings us to the new section, which I mentioned earlier. And this section is called deviations and is literally transferred from the Health Canada anonymization report template into this joint EMA Health Canada template. Companies submitting document packages under PRCI initiative are well aware of it, so as such, it is not a novel element. This section is not present in the EMA anonymization report template available in the current guidance, but we do see its added value. Therefore, we decided to have it included in the joint Health Canada EMA template. In this section, the applicants are expected to document any practices which depart from the standard, let's say gold standard of anonymization process. I've already given 2 examples of such deviations, which per se are not wrong approaches from a privacy perspective, but they just don't meet the level of expectation defined in the guidance. I will mention another example of that of reductions aimed to protect the study blind. Such reductions may be required and are perfectly justifiable in certain circumstances. Such cases will need to be documented and proper justification must be included in the deviation section of the anonymization report. I would like to conclude the presentation with a summary of foreseeable benefits of employing a mandatory anonymization report structure fields template. I have already mentioned few of the advantages of using the same template for all submissions sent to both EMA and Health Canada. Therefore, I will try to briefly focus on additional benefits of using a structure fields form. Overall, it is expected that a structure fields template would further facilitate the work of the applicants and regulatory agencies. In addition, it would increase the readability of the report. The template would contain just few free text fields, and the questions asked would be relatively straightforward to answer to. The report template will be accompanied by a set of completion instructions. Therefore, we are confident that an increase in the writing efficiency would be achieved at a minimum. At the same time, a higher content consistency could be achieved across various submissions, and the structure fields format will ensure a constant level of content quality. Using the template would most likely result in much shorter reports, less than, hopefully, 10 pages, easier to be followed by the portal users, and it would facilitate the identification of information of interest for the users, such as data utility considerations and data transformations. We do intend to make the new anonymization report template available in good time so that it can be used for the first document packages published as part of Policy 70 Restart. Obviously, the template can always be further refined based on user experience. And for that, we count on you to make the best use of it and on your constructive proposals for improvement. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and we'll be more than happy to address your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our speakers. And thanks a lot for all the questions in Slido. We are not trying to follow them, and we'll do our best to address them. I'm going to take the couple of first questions. So going to the Slido, the first question is, how will Policy 70 and EU CTR live together when it comes to the posting of the CSR, given the different timelines and anonymization strategy used by some sponsors, reduction for CTR and risk-based anonymization for CDP? So I'll try to address a couple of questions which were on the CTR versus Policy 70, knowing that this webinar is particularly for the step one of the relaunch, so not so much about the CTIS. So basically, Policy 70 and EU CTR do have different scope and different reason even. The Policy 70 deals with clinical data that are in marketing authorization application once they have received a CHMP opinion or have been withdrawn. And those clinical data come from clinical trial wherever they have been conducted, that we speak EU or non-EU, while the EU CTR is much more dealing with information and transparency that are from CTA, so from the authorization to conduct the clinical trial, to the clinical study report, but for studies which are conducted in the EU, regardless of if they're part of marketing authorization or not centrally approved. So they do have part in common. However, they have their very specific scopes. There will be, not now, but potentially more in a couple of years, some CSR that are common between Policy 70 and EU CTR, so basically on the CDP platform and in CTIS. We do have a working group within EMA with colleagues from CDP, and Radu and Karen, who just had presentation, are part of those groups, and colleagues from CTIS. So it's something we are fully aware. We also aligning between the groups the guidance on what's CCI and what's anonymization. Guidance for CTIS, which are still being looked at after the consultation. So pretty soon they will be updated. So this is something we are fully aware. This is something we are trying as much as possible to align. What they do have in common is that they need to be anonymized. Whatever is the technique and the tool you're using, that you speak reduction or that you speak transformation, what's important in both cases are that the data are anonymized. So this is common to both. And we also have a couple of questions on CCI, which I can take at the same time. They also need to have the CCI redacted, so commercially confidential information must be redacted. There was also some question about CCI being common to both, as well as if being rejected by policy 70, can they still be in CTIS? One of the definition of an information which is commercially confidential is that it's not in the public domain. So if you do have information released because non-CCI under clinical data publication, they are obviously not anymore commercially confidential for CTIS if they have been already published under policy 70. So just for you to be reassured, the alignment in the transparency principle on both sides are very much discussed at EMA, and of course guidance are being aligned. So I will try to move to the second question, which is how does the EMA intend to deal with the publication of clinical data on products that were evaluated while the policy was temporarily suspended? Indeed, we have quite a number of procedures which have not been published due to the suspension after our Brexit BCP and during the COVID-19 BCP. These procedures are not part of the step one of this relaunch, meaning they are not part of the procedure that will be first published. As explained by Karen, the step one is about procedure which will go for CHMP opinion after September 2023. So this temporarily suspended procedure are not going to be part of the step one. We're looking at a step two of this relaunch. We will then cover all type of marketing authorization as per policy 70, meaning new indication as well, line extension. And we will also take the opportunity to look at what we call the backlog or the waiting list or the suspended procedure. You call it as you wish. But we're going to look at it into having reasonable approach, which, for example, may be publication upon request or any other outside of the box possibility, but we will of course not ask to simply publish thousands of procedures that were suspended. We will of course look for a much more efficient and reasonable approach, but this will be more part of the step two of the relaunch. So moving on to the next one, which has been covered, is about the policy 70 reject CCI that is accepted in CTIS. So we've covered that question as well. Could you please share the approximate date of publication on EMA website of all the updated guidance document and Q&A document? We currently are working on those documents. The Q&A, I cannot give you a date from the top of my head because we are currently drafting it, and we also have the intention to use some of your questions of today in order to make it more useful. The guidance is likely to be updated more together with the anonymization reports template pretty soon. And we are planning to have it, of course, ready for the first step of this relaunch. As to the entire guidance, as you know, it's quite a big document. We are more planning to have a large update of the guidance when we reach the step two of the relaunch. However, we are using it as some kind of toolkit. So as soon as we can have question and answer, and of course templates, they will be put on the EMA website. I can see the order of question changing as I'm trying to read, so it's quite a challenging exercise. Maybe I can take this opportunity to open the floor should you have any direct question you'd like to ask. And if you don't mind putting your camera on, that'll be welcome. However, as it's recorded, if you wish not to, this is fine as well. Please put your hand up should you wish to ask a question. Otherwise, we'll simply go through the Slido question. We have one hands raised, and I'm afraid I can't really see the name. So if you don't mind.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
My name is Christian Kutzke from Amiral. I want to understand a bit better in regard of the relaunch of the policy 0070 and the ongoing procedures during the year 2023. Maybe that was presented in earlier slides, but unfortunately I was not able to attend in time. So I would appreciate if you can just repeat again what is the current time schedule for the relaunch of the policy and compliance of the applicant.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that what you're talking about is the scope, which was the new active substances. And so that is based, as I said in the first presentation, on the eligibility to the centralized procedure. So if your product became eligible for the centralized procedure on the basis of the new active substance, according to the Regulation 726/2004, that will be the deciding factor whether you're in scope. So in preparation for the relaunch, of course, internally at EMA, we are looking at how many products we anticipate would have opinions in CHMP in September. And we know that this can change. So, for example, you have a list of questions and it becomes suddenly a longer response time. And therefore, instead of your opinion in September, it may be delayed to October or further on. Likewise, you may be anticipating at this stage an opinion in September CHMP, and actually that opinion then is brought forward and the opinion takes place in either July or in August. And in that case, then you would fall out of the scope of policy 70, in terms of the relaunch, because your product, we're only looking at those that have a CHMP opinion from September onwards. So it's hard to actually predict exactly the number of procedures that will fall within at this moment in time, because there is that variability in terms of the response times in the 210-day cycle for the CHMP opinion. But yes, so basically then it is, as I say, from September CHMP onwards. So hopefully that clears up some of the confusion.
Yeah, thank you. That was very clear. And I expect that this is proactively submitted by the applicant, or are you going to contact the applicants which are receiving positive or negative opinion in September?
Yeah, we will be contacting them. And as I said, we hope to send out the invitation letters by the end of this month. And as we know, as I've referred to earlier, that there may be some that, we anticipate that there will be a CHMP opinion in September, but that may change. So once you receive the invitation letter, we will also be monitoring that the application is actually going to receive an opinion in September. But I mean, if your opinion is then delayed, that doesn't mean that you cannot prepare your package ahead of time. So it just means that you probably gained some extra time, because as we know, most of the documents are already submitted in the early stages. There's very few documents that are accepted for review in the final stages of a marketing authorization.
Yep, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands up. So if that's fine, we're going to continue with the questions we do have on Slido. So the next one is, what will be the phased approach for fully implementing CDP, and how frequently will phases roll out? Will sponsor be required to adhere to CHMP opinion date to determine timelines, or will timelines be triggered by invitation? So basically, this first step of the relaunch of CDP is planned to be in 2023. We are planning to work then on the step 2, which we hope to have in the course of 2024. And when I say the step 2, it means to cover the full scope of policy 70, so in the course of next year. Ideally, and indeed, the submission of the package should be at the latest 30 days after CHMP opinion. So ultimately, the CDP procedure will be triggered by this date of CHMP opinion, and we're also planning at publishing at the latest 60 days after Commission decision, as was presented by David earlier. For this step one, of course, the timelines are much more triggered by invitation for the simple reason that it's a little bit different timelines that what we want to adhere to ultimately for CDP. And we hope that for all the procedures that are falling under policy 70, we will also have some discussion with company at pre-submission meeting, but not pre-submission of CDP procedure, but really pre-submission meeting of your marketing authorization application, which means ultimately at the very, very start of your process, which will give then a lot of months in order to prepare. Maybe we move to the second one. I don't know if in the assistance we... So David, if you'd like to address the next one.
Yes, thank you. So the question is, how far in advance of the package submission due date will the letter of invitation be sent? The first batch, so to say, of letters of invitation will be sent either at the end of this month or the very beginning of June. And this will cover those applicants that have planned CHMP opinion dates in September and the following months of the year. And after that, once we normalize and catch up with the timelines of the scientific evaluation, we will target the invitation letters at day 121 of the procedure for initial marketing authorization applications and line extension applications, and for the line extensions applying in this step only to COVID-19 medicines, not to non-COVID medicines. And for extension of indication applications, we will send these invitation letters as close as possible to 90 days before CHMP outcome is planned.
Thank you very much, David. Moving to the next question, and I can see the 2 or 3 next one keep on moving, so we'll do our best to address them all. In CTIS, sponsors do not need to submit a justification report, but it's needed for Policy 70 submission, which is reviewed by EMA. What will be the review strategy for a product to keep consistent information available publicly? So indeed, the CTIS does not require justification report for the simple reason that it's not assessed by EMA, while Policy 70 does. Of course, if Policy 70 has rejected and it's not considered CCI, then we would expect not to see it in the document published under CTIS as being redacted for reason to be CCI, because that would not make much sense. As well as if you have a document which is published in CTIS with much more reduction, and then there would be some publication for Policy 70, then we would not accept something as CCI for the simple reason that in CTIS it has been redacted. However, as I mentioned earlier, the scenario of having document published on both platforms at the same time is not in the near future, and therefore we are working on guidance, and of course we will always be open to discussing with anyone who has the scenario should that come. So moving to the next question. Will the relaunch include new active substance packages that were submitted in 2022 and that are reaching a CHMP decision in fall of 2023? David, if you don't mind, thank you.
Yes, so I think I partly answered this question before. So those applications that are ongoing under assessment currently for new active substances that have a timetable with a planned opinion in September 2023 or during the last quarter of the year will be in scope for publication, and those are the the applicants that we will notify by the invitation letter shortly. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, David. I'm just looking if we have any hands raised. Should anyone would like to ask directly? No. So then we're moving on with the Slido. Next question: Health Canada accepts published data packages which have been approved by EMA along with a waiver of review. Does EMA intend to complete a full review of data packages which have already been reviewed and published by Health Canada? Karen,
Okay,
please.
thank you. Yes, we intend to continue our very close collaboration with Health Canada, and we know that Health Canada, as you say, accepts the EMA packages and republishes, and this is also something that we have had a very close collaboration on the COVID-19 products. So we've had joint submission meetings with Health Canada on particular applications, and that is something that we envisage continuing going forward, but it will be very much case by case in terms of the timelines of when the clinical data and the marketing authorization, so to speak, would be authorized both here and in Canada. So if it's in a similar time frame, but we're also very open to having a discussion around the anonymization strategy. So if you have a product that's going to be authorized in the European Union, for example, in December this year, and 3 months later it's going to be authorized in Canada or vice versa because of the timelines, then, I mean, we are very open to having that joint review of the anonymization strategy, which would then ensure that the package is acceptable to both authorities with no rework needed. And yeah, and this also will building on, as my colleague Radu presented, the joint anonymization report template, so that there would be no changes needed. And also we're discussing, you know, how we can work more closely with Health Canada in terms of looking at things like in the next phase of things like naming of documents, that we have common positions, and also in, you know, the difference between CCI and CBI and PPD and PI, that, you know, are these really, can we come to a common position? So we are looking really very closely to see that we can harmonise where we can, and that there isn't a duplication of work needed in order to publish the same package under a transparency policy.
Thank you very much, Karen. I think that does answer as well the next question, which was about the scope of the agreement with Health Canada. The next question: can we request an extension, to the posting deadline? Is there flexibility on the timelines? So basically, when we speak about particularly this step 1, we are fully aware that now jumping in the relaunch of CDP with us will require some flexibility. For the step 2 of the relaunch, we expect to have a much stronger and a more robust procedure, where we have an agreement on the timelines. But for this step 1, of course, we will be discussing with company once they have, of course, the invitation, about how much they can adhere properly to the timelines, knowing the short time for the preparation. So if we move to the next question: are there any changes to the documents in scope of Policy 70? Particularly, are all the CSRs of clinical trial in CTD 5.3 module required to be published, regardless of trial phase? Radu, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes. There are no changes in terms of publication of clinical trials. So all phases 1, 2, 3, yeah, even 4, they would need to be published. So just for your awareness, in the guidance document, in the current guidance document version 4, you have towards the end a annex where all sections of CTD 5.3 are listed, and those that are considered, for example, out of scope, are clearly highlighted. And for example, the analytical method section is considered out of scope. But yeah, just to come back to the initial answer, there are no changes compared to what has been done so far.
Thank you very much. Next question. Given the WHO has ended the COVID global health emergency, why are COVID-related submissions still being handled under the exceptional transparency measure policy. So basically, the interest in seeing clinical data for COVID-19 related product is still very high. And therefore, we are not stopping the publication for those products as part of the clinical data publication. The public is indeed very much eager to know, to have clinical data, to have safety data, etc. And that's why the COVID-19 products are still published under CDP. And additionally, it would not be very efficient to stop any COVID publication and to restart it with a step 2 or even a step 1. And therefore, we keep the COVID-19 publication as it is today. Moving to the next question. Will there be coordination between the member state approach to CSR reduction in CTIS and EMA approach to CSR reduction under Policy 70? How would the sponsor proceed if there are differences in approaches CCI by member state and EMA? I will give the floor to Radu, please.
Thank you, Scott, for the question. I think, as my colleagues have already highlighted, we are probably years before any CSR will actually need to be published in both for Policy 70 and within CTIS. Nevertheless, we have to take into account that for Policy 70, we actually start the interactions with the market authorization or the applicants actually earlier in the process of review. So most likely, by the time the same CSR needs to be published in the CTIS, we would be already be in an advanced stage of discussing or even actually accepting or rejecting the CCI proposals. Obviously, we will be ideally, indeed, would be to have a collaboration with the member states at the same time, but this is something that we'll look into in the coming years.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to take a last question before we wrap up. If the field-based anonymization report, if qualitative is selected, would a justification be expected? Some of the fields around threshold, sorry, my screen keep on moving, residual risk would become irrelevant. Radu, would you like to address this question?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think once the template will be actually shared and will be obviously, as I mentioned, accompanied by clear instructions, even for a qualitative option, I think there would, while you're not going to have like numeric values for the residual risk or the threshold, you could still include a qualitative threshold, such as low or very low. So I would say that the fields might still be relevant even for a qualitative option.
Thank you very much. I'm going to check if no direct question online. I think we're going to close the session on question and answer, as we can see that time is passing pretty quickly. We still have some questions, but as mentioned earlier, we will look at them and try to address as much as possible in the Q&A that's going to be published. I would like just to remind you that the webinar is recorded and will be available on the EMA website, together with all the presentation. As I can see, some questions were about some slide that were on screen. So please have a look on the website, and then you will find all the presentation available. Again, if you want to reach out, do not hesitate. You can use the EMA web form. Just simply start the subject line with CDP. It will then go directly to the CDP team, and we'll be happy to get back to you and help you as much as you want. And here is the team behind the scenes. So if you have question as well when you have received the letter, again, you will have the name of a coordinator and we will get back to you, as well as for the step one, we will be more than happy to have a meeting in helping you to prepare your packages. So on this note, I'd like to thank you all for your attention today, and thanks all the speaker from today. And I wish you a wonderful end of the day. Thank you very much for your time.